about.
Is it fact? Is anything in there historical?
That's the highest I can do.
Very little, probably. I think one important thing to bear in mind is that ancient writers had a very different understanding of what fact or fiction was from us today. It wasn't written to be a factual account of the past. I don't think that's the way in which these biblical writers understood the past. But as a historian of the Bible, I think there's very little that's factual.
King David?
No.
Moses?
No.
Somebody said Jesus, but I don't think they were taking the Lord's name in vain.
No, Jesus, most scholars would agree that he existed, yeah.
So she's wrong.
Well, you have to be.
Yeah.
If Jesus came through David's lineage and David didn't exist, then how did Jesus exist? Egypt. That's the end of the well, the video goes on for 20 minutes because I think longer. They just sticked on that point from one to the other, ranting who the covenant was with and who. He's a Muslim, the other guy's a Hebrew Israelite. Correct? Okay. So let me take a look at what they were reading. Wasn't that what they were reading?
Yeah.
For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one by a bondmaid, the other by a free woman. But he who was of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, but he of the free woman was by promise. That's what the guy just read. I'll quote them verbatim. And then they went on to answer blah blah blah. But the reason why you saw the other guy looking in the Bible, I mean, that conversation could have been over in a second. Why? Because if you read the next line down, what does it say? Which things are an allegory. For these are the two covenants, the one from the Mount Sinai, which gendered to bondage, which is Agar. So what they say that Egypt means bondage. They say the place of Egypt means bondage. So the Israelites say, that's why we were in Egypt, because it's the place of bondage. We were slaves there. Can you see how ignorant they are? If they want the sage to come and speak to them, I'll speak to them. But don't display your ignorance for the whole world to see. Because if you understand, when they speak of Egypt in the Bible, they are not speaking about the Egypt that you see over there. Incontrovertible that Egypt of the scriptures is not the country on the map. It is the term used in the allegories to designate the plain state or land of an embodied life, life on earth. Egypt is just the earth, or the state of locale of bodily life on it. It even at times connotes the physical body itself, as in the flesh pots of Egypt. Hence, the descendants of Abraham and later of the 12 sons of Jacob into Egypt are again the fable of the soul adventure here. They call him a Hebrew.
A Hebrew, yeah. To cross over, yeah.
So it means to cross over. Let me ask you a question, those of you who are wiser than I. If I cross over a river and the peoples them start saying, I'm a Hebrew, are my family Hebrews?
No.
They're not.
No.
So the people call me Hebrew, but my family is not Hebrew.
No.
How does that make sense to the sense? How does it make sense? The only way that could make sense, unless Abraham or the word Hebrew is a title. By the Holy Spirit use allegories to keep simple Christians from doctrines they are not matured enough to handle. So they're saying these things were put in the Bible for those of you who are stupid enough, knock yourself out. But the more intellectual and spiritual will advance, because we would look at the hidden meanings behind the words and did what? What did he say? He says, let me quote him verbatim, of the more intelligent and spiritual advance, finding the deeper meaning and thus the process by which God gradually leads them, thus to whom he would reveal himself, from the sensible to the intelligible world. In this way, the genuine Gnostics' knowledge, pondering the obscure passages of the Bible, takes flight from this world to the other and become like God. So what is he saying? He's saying, if I want to look on the Bible and go, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, God created the world in 6 days, if I want to believe that, knock yourself out. The more intelligent, we would see it and go, nah, that's not what it means. Furthermore, there is no Adam and Eve. How much creation stories is in the book of Genesis? Do they know who they're playing with here? How much creation stories is in the book of Genesis? 4. None of them make sense. Adam, Eve was created twice. Am I lying on that? Do you know Adam had a first wife called Lilith? We've discussed this, right?
Yeah.
How come they don't talk about her? Christians will be shocked when they hear this shit. But how come they don't talk about her? They left that shit out of the Bible. This is the books the girls was talking about. Some of them they left out the Bible, but you talk to an historian and he goes, yeah, Adam's first wife, yeah. They were both created equal, but she didn't want to, she didn't want to lie under Adam. She don't want to, and so she left and went back to heaven. I'm like, really? In other words, how can you teach me this shit literally? We have to wake up. Who wrote Mark, Matthew, Luke and John? Who wrote the 4 books? What they call the Synoptic Gospels.
Is that 4 books of Moses?
No, that's Mark, Matthew, Luke and John.
Okay.
Is it the Nicene? I'm just going to guess. Is it the Nicene Council?
We don't know, Sean.
Oh.
This is the thing. We don't have no authors for the books.
So did it just appear, Jeff?
But if I sit down here and quote you something, the first thing you say, who wrote that?
Yeah.
You ask me for everything. But then you would just read Mark, Matthew, Luke, and when I ask you who wrote them, you have no, you don't tell me anything. You just tell me to believe. In it. Let's see what he was involved in. True belief versus necessary belief. In the book of Perplex, he states, me and Mondays draw a distinction between true belief, which was belief about God that produced intellectual perfection. What did I just say? It was true beliefs about God that produced intellectual perfection. Isn't that why we're here?
Mm.
Then we have true beliefs, which produce intellectual, and then we have necessary beliefs, which were conductive to improve social order. I can understand that. So the latter, that's the Hebrew Israelites. They confuse everything, and you're standing there confused because you don't even know what they're doing. So when they're like, we're on the street and we're trying to raise this young man, fine. But you must understand that comes on improving social order.
Mm.
Don't get the two confused, God. I just told you, what is God? If I give you each a paper and say to you now, write down on your paper your interpretation of God. Each one of you sitting here would write down a different interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? So when they're like, our God is real, prove it. Because now when you talk to the Christians, what are they doing? They're out in the stars. Now, they're talking about quantum physics. And saying, well, we can't get something from nothing because once this and the Big Bang and this explodes, that's how we know God exists. Really? You can't use your Bible anymore to prove that? Of course you can't. Because it's garbage. If read literally.
Mm.
Do you understand what I'm saying? So they're now out in the stars and I'm like, tread carefully. Later class. He used an example, the notion that God becomes angry. We all know God becomes angry, right? We've seen that in the Bible, right?
Yes.
With people who do wrong. In the view of Maimonides, taken from Avicenna, which is another Arabian scholar, God does not become angry with people as God has no human passion. What did he just say? So, I don't really understand what he's saying because, as I said to you before, he is a preeminent scholar. And I know for a fact that he has read the books of Moses and everybody. And then there's a few times when God became angry with Moses. So up here, he's saying God has no human passion. But it's important for them to believe God does, so that they desist from sinning. So what is he saying? He's saying God is not corporeal. To get angry is a human nature. So therefore, if I'm sitting down beside me on Mondays, I'm going to ask him. So when Moses was out there and God was getting angry with them, and angry with the children of Israel, and angry with the Hebrews and making them eat their babies, is that not so? He would have patted me on my shoulder and said, no. But if you're a literalist, you'll take the story to heart. Because to you, God is corporeal. And that's what you have to establish when you're talking to them. Do you believe in a corporeal deity? If they say yeah, walk away from them. You botch. So, let me get things straight, because I'm going to have to let you know what he's saying. When he says there are some few who claim to know more than the Jews, somebody like yourself would look on that and go, oh, a Jew. A Jew just means someone who is learnt. It doesn't mean a race of people. It doesn't make sense. Do you understand? So, the Israel presence in Egypt was preceded by an earlier presence in Palestine. Why is there no archaeological record of Israel or the Hebrew people prior to the 13th century BC? Is there any records of their history?
No.
This is very important. This is very important. Because if there is no history of them, as he says, why is there no extra biblical evidence linking any specific Semitic tribe to the Hebrew people? He's asking questions. And why did the so-called 10 lost tribe disappear from history without an archaeological trace of their existence? Yeah. For Israel history before the... Sorry. Where am I? And why did the so-called 10 lost tribe disappear from history without an archaeological trace of their existence? For Israel history before the 13th century, we have only the biblical account, but that rests on a shaky foundation. So what he's saying is, the only way we can record Israel history unless we go into the Bible. So to prove their self, they'll open up the Bible and go, see?
Well, that's a bit silly though, isn't it?
This doesn't really make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
The reason why it doesn't make any sense. Who wrote the first 5 books? Celsus categorically accused the Christians of changing their gospel story in many ways in order to answer the objection of their opponents. His accusation is that some of them, as it were, in a drunken state, produce self-induced visions, remodel their gospel from its first written form, and reform it so that they may be able to refute the objections brought against it. We must not understand or take in a literal sense what is written in the book of creation, nor from it the same ideas which are participated by the generality of mankind. Do you understand that? It's much recommended to us to hide the literal meaning of it, and not to lift the allegorical veil, which covers the truth contained therein. When taken in its literal sense, the work gives the most absurd and most extravagant idea of the deity. Whosoever should divine its true meaning ought to take great care in not divulging it. This is a maxim repeated to us by all our sages, principally concerning the understanding of the works of the 6 days. I put sex there. Why did I put sex? 6 and sex is the same thing. We'll get into that into the next class. This is just things I want to show you. So he's saying we must take great care concerning the works of the 6 days. He literally is telling you that you need to hide that. Why?